Welcome to our spooky edition of the Gold Standard Podcast. To my left, I have the wonderful B.F. Skinner. To my right, I have the Queen of the Sea, Ursula. And myself, I am Farmer Elsa. Welcome. So today, we are speaking about the scaries of ABA. I think one topic that's pretty scary right off the bat is burnout.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. ABA is definitely a very taxing career path to go down. But as we've talked about before and on and off the podcast, there are many things that you can do to reduce the likelihood of having burnout. I just can't take you seriously.
I just hear like...
Take two. It's very hard to take myself even seriously right now because your hair is bald. I'm balding and my head is dented. So I am the Temu version of BF Skinner right now. But no, in all seriousness, we do talk about getting yourself ready for the school year. I know we're still very early on. We're rolling into October where, quote unquote, shit does hit the fan. The honeymoon period is, momentum occurs, right? That burnout starts, and it's just when the behaviors start to emerge and that honeymoon period is over. Yeah. So being organized. This is the second time I said the word organized. Carry on.
You okay? You were saying? Do you want me to say organized?
Ursula is so upset right now. She's crying.
Tears of joy.
She's going to sing us a song later.
All right, carry on.
I mean, the same with everything. As long as you have a plan and you are organized, there are ways to combat the burnout. It is approaching quickly, but luckily we have mastered and we've made many TAs and we have support groups and each other to lean on in the field. So yeah, I mean, burnout is scary, but there's definitely ways that we can overcome that. I think the one big thing is just noticing that it's occurring.
I think as far as burnout too, I think it's like you said, acknowledging, but almost doing something about it beforehand. So like those antecedent strategies and like, hey, here's some ways I'm going to avoid burnout, because sometimes we're at the point where it's too late.
Right.
And then we're almost like digging ourselves out of a bigger hole than if we had just set ourselves up for success.
Yeah, and I think the biggest piece that I've always taken away from it is the report out piece of that. Is if we make a plan and there's a support strategy in place, I want to know what step you're on, where you're at, and where you need that other piece of support. Or myself, if I need that other piece of support, I need to be feeling like there's a reciprocal factor to then also get that feedback at the end to say, all right, well, you did step X, Y, Z. You forgot about A and B, though.
Yeah.
We said we would work on this. Now we're going to.
But I think having that person to hold you accountable and saying, hey, I'm noticing that you're starting to burn yourself out. Maybe don't take on that next piece, whether it's, someone at home or even, your coach, some kind of support system that you have in place. Yeah. And I think what's really nice, even here at BDA, is we have those supports in place so we can minimize that burnout, whereas sometimes you might be on your own.
I think, too, we have to highlight this for the supervisors, right? It may be a tough piece of feedback to give a newly certified BCBA, but they put that in place for a reason, right? You're supposed to be that person's soundboard. And if they're coming to you and telling you that, hey, I just signed up for 11 home cases and full-time BC work in a district, you should really rein them in and say, I commend you for, coming in blazing, but I think you should take a step back and just really understand how many hours that is and how much work you're truly taking on. Because I don't think people realize, okay, you're saying 30 hours in a district or 40 hours in a district, depending on if you're third party or contracted by the district. But that doesn't account for all of the work that you're most likely going to be taking home.
Right.
So I know nobody talks about that, but a lot of the work that you're bringing home is not accounted for in that 40-hour work week because that's in person. So if you're bringing work home and you have, let's even lower it from 11 to 5 home cases, and you're trying to be an adequate supervisor and provide that RBT with that minimum 5% or more, depending on the family, or if the challenging behavior is extremely high or intense and you need to be there more often than that 5%, again, that's all in your free time outside of that district work. So now not only are you bringing that work home, you also have to compile all of that other in-home session hours as well. So really breaking that down for them, because I don't think that they know that they're jumping in with 2 feet that way. So that's something I like to do. And I know Bree and I bring this up on our new BC cohort here at BDA, is just advocating for the fact that we'd rather you take on work slowly and continue to take more on as you find your footing, rather than saying, hey, I'll just take on a boatload of work and then begin to drown and then try to come off of work immediately. That's much harder than saying, oh, I have an extra 10 hours this week. I think I can handle another home case. So you as a supervisor really have that confidence to say to them, slow your roll, think about the work that you're taking on, and once you feel comfortable, continue to take on more work.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that also comes from the fact of feeling like you need to do enough, like you need to be enough for that role or to fit those shoes or to fit that support team. But in this field, you have to know that there are boundaries and there are limits that you can set for yourself. You are enough. What you do is enough. As long as you start every day and you end every day with your principles, I feel like that's more than enough. So taking on more than what you need because you think that it's something that you need to do, that's something, especially in BDA, where we have a very strong stance on just taking a step back and realizing that you don't have to do that to impress or fit any kind of shoes or fit any type of mold. What you do is enough. What you bring is enough. And for all the extra, we have support.
I like how you brought that up. So acting on your morals. I think that's another quote unquote scary of ABA, is being confronted with ethical decisions that you're not really sure on whether to go right, left, and so on and so forth. So how do you guys feel about clinicians being stuck between an ethical decision and a hard place? Like, where could you go? How can you make decisions? Obviously, I'm not prompting you guys with a specific scenario, but who do you lean on when you fall on that hardship?
I would even say the people you lean on don't necessarily even have to be the people that are your direct supervisors or that are even affiliated with the case. It's someone who has just sound advice, someone that you've maybe gone to previously about tough decisions and morals, because at the end of the day, at least for me, I would rather make a decision based off of what my typical moral is than subsequently something that I'm not comfortable with.
And just to clarify, you redacting all of the personal information and not giving all of that to whoever you're speaking to.
Yeah.
And I think it helps, again, going back to the support systems that we have here, we recognize that not everyone has a team of people to do that with. You know, we have our internal clinical review processes. We have those people and that kind of chain of command, especially if we end up in some of these situations. Whereas sometimes you might be a BCBA in a school district where you're the only BCBA and you have an ethics code to follow, but that school district doesn't. They might say, hey, I need you to do X, Y, and Z. Or, by the way, you now have 100 kids on your caseload. How's that going to work? How feasible is that? That almost ties into like burnout and everything else, where now you feel obligated to take on that caseload. Ethically, you know you're kind of in a tough spot, but this is your job. This is, you know, what you essentially signed up for, whether you realized it or not.
Yeah.
And I've said that to a district before, and not just one, to be completely fair. Like, I, as a board certified behavior analyst, is held to a certain ethics standpoint. If I don't follow this, I can essentially be reported and have my certification revoked based on this recommendation or suggestion by you as a district. I totally understand that you're not held to the same ethics as I am, but I respectfully have to decline for the fact that my license could be in jeopardy. Yeah. And typically when I put it that way, it puts it into perspective for them. They don't want to put you in harm's way. Do you know what I mean? And I totally understand that there are multiple levels at play here, whether it be budget or parents pressing for a specific resource, or just the fact that they're overloaded in the district. But don't be afraid to say, I physically can't do this because of X, Y, and Z. And also, I don't believe in it.
Yeah, I think that's the takeaway piece too, is like it goes against your baseline behaviors and your morals. So even though it might sound like the right thing to do, and that's what the district is kind of requesting, like, hey, we have these extra 5 kids, like you wouldn't mind, yeah, it doesn't sound like a lot, but that does stray from what I would normally choose.
Yeah.
I mean,
and I think too, most of the time, like clearly there's a need for you if they're asking you to do more, asking you to do certain things. So if you were to push back and have that conversation in a way where you're still respectful, there's a need there. They're not just gonna be like, oh, all right, there's the door.
Right.
Because we know there's always needs in these districts or anywhere we go for our services. But I think that's a huge piece, is like they feel like their job's in jeopardy if they say no to these things.
Yeah.
And also laying out your day for them too, I think is super important. And I've learned this, and I know you know this too, as being a district director, just saying like, I have X amount of hours in the day and I have all of these students. Which ones are the top priority, and how do you want me to allocate my time? Yeah. And then put that in their court. Say, here's my time throughout the day. Where do you want me at what time and what day to serve all of these students? And then again, like just putting in perspective for them, like, now it's your job to make me a schedule and I'll adhere to it. Yeah. But I want you to see how difficult that's going to be.
Right.
And then as you make me that schedule and more things come out, or a crisis arises, I'm going to be in a different building because this is where you wanted me to be. So always keeping that in mind too, like really laying it out for them, not only the standards, but also you're only one person. You can only be split one way.
Yeah. And I mean, this kind of goes along with what we were just talking about, but, giving that feedback back to the school. So now feedback is another pretty scary factor of ABA. I like both. I think both are, we as an organization love feedback. It's what we thrive on. It's how we get better. But that's a learned skill. I firmly believe that giving and receiving feedback is a learned skill. You have to be able to know how to take it, know how to react to it, and when, because that's the really important piece. I'm not going to give someone, well, I personally, but also I wouldn't agree with giving feedback in the middle of a crisis in a high stress situation, all of these do's and don'ts that might not align with what's happening in the moment. I would rather not have to fight through a situation where, someone might be getting punched in the face. I'm like, oh no, move to the left a little bit. Like, let's get through this.
It really depends on the person, I feel like, right? Yeah. The person that you're providing it to. Because I will say I have provided feedback in crisis situations, but I know the staff, I have a great rapport with them. And I'm also putting like safety first. So like even down to like contriving the environment during a crisis, like if a learner starts to have or engage in tantrum behavior and there's a stapler over there, there's a hole puncher over there, there's a desk full of papers over there, I'm immediately like, you please go swipe all these things and get them out of the room. Let's sterilize the environment because I know what this is going to turn into. Yeah. So like those types of
and
pieces of feedback,
that goes along with
like
knowing the feedback to give versus like in that moment as
it's also the way you say it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Versus like, hey, so is now a good time to talk about like your conversions? You were a little bit late.
That's poor judgment.
But I think too, even from a BCBA standpoint, like you're also going to be involved in that crisis if you're giving that feedback. And I actually had a teacher say that to me my first year as a BCBA. I was helping her out in a crisis situation, and she looked at me. She's like, wow. She's like, I didn't know BCBAs did this. She's like, all my other previous BCBAs, they would stand at the door and tell me what to do. And
don't be that person.
Yes.
If a behavior is too intense and you're too afraid, get extra support.
Yes.
Or let the funding source or the district know, like, you're not able to handle that situation. Because nobody likes somebody who just sparks orders in the back of the room or at the door.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer on if I can't do it, I won't give feedback on it. I don't believe in giving feedback on something that I'm not practiced in. and or wouldn't put myself
Well,
in,
that's just,
in that
again, leaning
situation.
on your ethics. Like you shouldn't
Yeah.
be giving feedback on something that you're not competent in
Yeah.
or have had training in the past on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So now the question is, in both of your careers, when you've been given tough feedback, how do you react?
Honestly, we're probably not the good people
Yeah.
or the person to
They're like,
ask because we have
"Great."
very thick skin. We actually welcome constructive feedback because it's what makes us better.
Oh, yeah.
So we welcome that. I mean, as long as you're not being a jerk about it, obviously, because then I'm going to say, okay, that thanks. But like, also,
Yeah.
why are you being so nasty? So again, it's like tone of voice. But typically we receive it quite well. And then I'm amped to implement it. Like I look for opportunities to toss in the feedback and apply it.
Yeah.
So
It's like almost immediately I want
right. I want to use them as teachable moments. I want to get better. That's just me as a person. I always want to do the next best thing. I'm
Yeah.
always striving for better. I don't believe in perfection. I always believe that there's room for growth. And ABA just meshes so well with that belief system because you're not going to know everything. You're always
Yeah.
going to be growing. You're always going to be learning. There's always going to be new literature that comes out. So
Yep.
that's one of those scaries that you just have to get comfortable with is you're going to receive feedback. And if you don't want to receive it and you don't receive it well, you most likely will not be successful in this field. You're always going to have somebody who knows more than you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Like you shouldn't be upset or hurt by that.
Yeah.
It's not anything on your character.
Because they got better from receiving feedback themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most likely.
And I think it's hard because in the current world that we live in, I know we've talked about this before, everything's immediate feedback. And typically it's immediate reinforcement. Like you're
Yeah.
typically never encountering any kind of like negative things or aversive things. So sometimes the first time people get feedback, they're like, oh, what do you mean?
Yeah.
I didn't realize like
What do you mean I have to improve?
Right. So it's hard because I feel like we're up against a lot, especially in this field, especially people that are newly in this field.
Yeah.
They've never encountered that before. And it can be a lot. You might see, more of that emotional type responding at times because people just aren't used to it because it's not something that happens day to day anymore.
Yeah.
But from a supervisor perspective, you have to know how to provide feedback in a
Yeah.
respectful way. Like
If
Brandon
you
was
could break
saying,
it down, what's like top 3 things to do or to know when providing tough feedback?
well, if you know an individual and you've worked with them, you have a rapport, which is always wonderful. And you typically learn that person and when it's best to provide them with feedback. I know certain CAs, they want it in the moment. CAs, RBTs, we call them CAs here at BDA. Some of them want it in the moment. Others, I know that they're very involved in what they're doing. And if I provide it in the moment, it's going to throw off their game even more. So I save that for later. So I would say that's number 1 is getting to know your staff and their preferences.
Yeah.
Obviously timing being one of them. And then avoiding that compliment sandwich. I know we talk about this a lot in new BC cohort as well. It's very disingenuous when you provide somebody a compliment, feedback, constructive feedback, compliment. It just feels like, okay, you're delivering this. You're trying to make yourself feel better about this. Just provide them with what you're seeing. You want to obviously highlight positives. If you want to start with those, great. Hey, I really love how you did X, Y, and Z. Do you know how we can make it better or how you could really be a top-notch clinician? We can do this instead.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it doesn't have to be positive, negative, positive. You do want to have some positivity in there. You could even fall back on, hey, I really love how hard you're trying. I know this is a new skill for you. I know you've never done this before. Your tenacity is admirable, whatever you want to say. But let's pivot and try it this way next time.
Yeah.
I think that's very important instead of just saying negative, negative, negative. So that's another, a secondary piece is avoid that compliment sandwich, but also highlight positives where you can, even when providing feedback to teachers in classroom management strategies.
Yeah.
I had this discussion today with a BCBA who I overlapped with in district. She wasn't a fan of the reinforcement system. I said, that's fine. I said, salvage what you can and highlight why those things are important and that they're good for the learner, good for the classroom. Then fall back, provide that constructive feedback, which leads me to my next point, which would be that third point. Lean on the data. Remove as much emotional baggage as you can when providing feedback. Take yourself out of it and reflect on things that we can see within the environment. And if you've taken treatment integrity data, graph it and show it to them. Yeah. If you have, an entire classroom ripped apart multiple days in a row, just say like, hey, like, look around, like the classroom's getting destroyed. And I think what we can do is tweak this system a little bit and we can reduce the likelihood of tantrum behavior.
Yeah.
Like I said, take yourself out of it. Focus on the environment, things that they can see, and also remove them out of it so they don't take it personally. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's not you, it's the system. We're going to fix the system, and then we're going to have an easier time with X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. And again, kind of going along with that, destroying rooms, I think another really scary part of ABA is we're so focused and practiced on getting to the plan, and we know the plan's going to work. And what happens when it doesn't? We kind of feel like shit. We're like, oh, but
so
we
failing?
Came up with this
you
plan.
Mean failing?
Yeah. Which I think is one of the biggest helpers in this entire field. I've failed more times than I've succeeded, and I am so thankful for it because it's helped me be better and it helps me know what to avoid. But I know that it also is a huge stress for a lot of our clinicians, like when you're following the plan to a T and it still doesn't go your way.
I actually had this conversation with a staff today. She's going for her BCBA, getting supervision, and she had said, she's like, well, even, for these supervision assignments or for anything I'm doing, like, what if I make a mistake? And I was like, good, you're supposed to.
Yeah.
Not to say they should be like these giant mistakes and, ethical situations, but not every plan's going to work for every kid. And that's why sometimes you lead with, we're going to try this, we're going to look at the data and fall back on the data. Because I have had plans that it's like, I didn't really think that through.
Yeah.
But it's a learning curve. And, even however many years into the field people are, there's still going to be times where you're going to be humbled, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I also think it's important to know, quote unquote, when to take the L.
Yeah.
Don't let your ego get in the way of it. If something is really not working.
Yeah.
Don't push through.
Don't push through. Pivot. Tweak the plan. Try again.
Yeah.
There's no sense of pushing through and causing this crazy amount of challenging or maladaptive behavior because your ego gets in the way or you're afraid to fail.
Yeah.
Don't make that mistake and put a family through like an extremely stressful situation that just doesn't need to be. You can always back out and say, like, you know what, I'm noticing a few things that just aren't working. Or even for the family, just say, like, throughout implementing this today, I realized that I can make this plan run more smoothly for you and not be as taxing and come back with a new and better idea. So, yes, failure can be scary. We all go through it. You don't get everything right 100% of the time, but that's how you grow, like Brianna is saying. When you fail, you reflect on that situation. You use it as a learning opportunity and you come back better and stronger next time. One final thing I'd like to bring up as a spooky thing that you may be a little bit nervous about when entering the field of ABA is working with families. Yeah. It definitely can be intimidating when working with a new family, going into their home, providing support. What are some things that you guys recommend when entering a new home? How to introduce yourself?
At least at BDA, for any of our clinicians that are going out in the field, your supervising BCBA should be going with you the first couple times anyway. So, I mean, I know I've talked to plenty of people and, this happens, thankfully not here, but in other places, it's like, oh, my supervisor, or I was given an address and told, figure it out, let me know how it goes. Yeah. So I think making sure you have the appropriate supports in place is key, because it is strange to be in somebody's house, especially like this is one of those fields where like we do that, and that's not common for other fields, especially in like that quote unquote medical realm.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's new. You're in someone's environment, their safe space. I always try to lead with inclusion of everything. So if I'm running a plan, if I'm discussing programs, I'm always including the parents, like explaining why we're doing what we're doing, what it is, what the end goal is, and future programs. What do you want to add in? What do you want to see? What's important to you? Because it could differ. Like we could walk into a home and say, this is what we have for little Johnny. And then mom and dad could be like, I don't want that. I want to work on.
Then immediately your rapport is damaged.
Yeah.
Right.
Collaboration is definitely key. Getting the right supports is definitely key. When entering another person's home, I also think it's extremely important when you include their cultural values and also ask them what they're comfortable with. So even down to like taking your shoes on and off,
Huge.
where to leave your bag. Some families don't want your pocketbook on their couch or your backpack on their couch. I always say, like, is it okay if I leave this here? Would you like me to take my shoes on or off? Some families are strictly no shoes in the house. So just kind of blending in as much as you can.
Right.
Is going to make it more seamless. You're going to seem like more a part of the household
Yeah.
Right.
rather than just coming in and doing whatever you want. Like, you have to understand too, like, as uncomfortable it is for you, this might be their first ABA experience and it's just as uncomfortable for them.
Right.
So make it easy on the family and yourself. Like, the more you leave that door open to say, like, what would you guys like? You'll find your footing and where to go and what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's also less stress for them because you also have to think most of these sessions are done in the afternoon after the parents have just worked a long day themselves.
Yeah.
The last thing they want to do is have to like manage you or figure out what you're doing and where you're going to be, what you're going to like, are they going to be in the kitchen? Are they going to be it's just better that you include them. You let them know what you have lined up for the day so that they feel as comfortable and relaxed as possible. It is their home after all. So, sorry, your tentacle fell. So
Keep your hands to yourself.
Jesus. So it's easier to lead with those things versus having to build that rapport later. You can start right away going with the cultural side, making sure that you're adapting and including.
I think a big part of that too is explaining, like you had said, including them from the very beginning, but also let them know those quote unquote non-negotiables. You guys have to be home when we have these sessions.
Yeah.
You can be doing X, Y, and Z in the house in this time period because I won't need you present if I'm just doing programming. But if it's a parent training opportunity or you need to be present for X amount of time of the session, you need to include those things. Because I think that's one scary thing too, is basically telling a family, you're required to do this. And I know that has to be done very early on and it may be uncomfortable because you don't have that full rapport with them yet. But laying those clear boundaries and expectations are so important because like you had said, it sets you up for success and they know what to expect.
It makes it so much easier to work your future sessions because you've already established that these are the boundaries. These are what I need while I'm here, but everything else can be negotiable. So, all right, we don't have to do that program. We can work on something else. What would you like to put in? How would you like to run this? Would you like to be more of a part? Would you like to model this time and I'll model later? Just those little clarifying questions mean so much to a lot of the parents because, again, they worked a long day themselves. They're coming in to you in their home after, they kind of just want to change and get into like comfy clothes and chill on the couch. So make it as easy as you possibly can for them.
That's why I think it's important to outline, like when I'm running this program, I won't need you to be in the room. So if you want to go flip the laundry, start cooking dinner, I'm totally cool with that. Letting them know that. And I guess that brings me to my next point, eating dinner, right? So when most of the time you're going to be there, like you said, after school. Sometimes that flows into dinner time. Maybe you're working on a feeding program and the family invites you to sit and eat dinner with them. What do you do? Spooky.
I think it depends. I know it's like a gray area as far as the BACB is concerned now with accepting things less than $10, things like that. But it's almost that question of, will me declining this damage the relationship more than me just having something? Correct. Or lucky for me, I can say, I'm so sorry, I appreciate it, but I can't have that because
dietary
restrictions.
So that's always an easy out, so to say. Or if that's something that the family wants to include you, maybe you say, is it okay if I bring mine?
Yeah.
And do it that way.
Yeah.
Or if, like, for example, I've been out in the community and, we've gone to like the mall and the family's like, oh, please let me buy you something. We're going to sit down and eat. I'll make it a point to get something myself. And if that's something to be a part of it. But I think it's that weird thing where it's like, is someone going to call the BACB on me because I took a French fry?
Yeah.
So it's.
But on the counterpoint, in the past, I've actually had families extremely upset. I had a mom blocked the door physically with her body because I would not accept a gift from her. She wouldn't let me leave until I did. In turn, I did end up kind of switching it and using it for a learner session. But it can damage the relationship if you don't handle it the right way and you just straight up say no. There should be a reason, and it's honestly it's okay to give that reason too and say, sometimes it's against my ethics. I can't do it because of what's in the BACB, but could I bring my own dinner? Mm-hmm. I don't mind sitting down with you guys, but I do have to do things my way. As long as you're cool with that, sure, I'll join for dinner.
I have had a similar experience. The family wasn't upset, but they were jokingly trying to get me to eat a cookie. For those who know me, I don't really eat desserts. And
I eat all the desserts.
And when I got home, guess what I had in my backpack? A cookie in a Ziploc bag. So like they meant absolutely no harm. Did I eat the cookie? No. But like they still sent me home with a cookie.
Yeah.
So like some families will try to get you to bend ethics. We totally understand that could be something that's spooky in ABA.
Yeah.
But again, if you're always leaning on your ethics, you're putting your morals first, and you're explaining that to people, 9 times out of 10, they're going to be extremely respectful of that and not peer pressure you into having a cookie.
Yeah.
What kind of cookie was it?
I don't remember. It was years ago. It was probably even before the $10 rule, to be completely honest with you.
Would be nice right now.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast on the ABA Scaries. We look forward to seeing you for the next one.
Happy Halloween.